Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. To start this pattern, I will take a marginal line at the top of my pattern because my pattern is not equal. Now I will take my shoulder to shoulder measurements, which is 15 inches, and I would divide that by 2, which is 7.5, because my pattern is on fold. Now I would add ½ inch to that. That is in case you are going to be joining with your sleeve. Now take 1 inch downwards. Now from the folded edge of my pattern, I will take 3 inches. This is procedure to connect your shoulder slope. Now take your armhole depth, mine is 8.5 inches, and I would connect my line. Now on this line will be my bust line. As you can see, my pattern is on fold. Now moving on, I will take my shoulder to waist, which is 17. And I will take the length I want for my top, which is 25. And I would add 2 inches for the hem. Now I will take my bust circumference divided by 4. Now I would add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. Now I would take my waist circumference divided by 4 and I would add 1.5 also for seam allowance, and I take my hip right here divided by 4 and I add 1.5 for seam allowance. Now I will take my shoulder to my nipple point, which is 11.5 inches. Now I will take my shoulder to under bust, which is 14.5 inches, and I would also extend the lines. Now do take your under bust circumference divided by 4. Now add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. I would label my pattern. This is my bust. This is my bust point. This is my under bust. This is my waist, and this is my length. Now I will start taking my nipple to nipple measurements. Mine is 8 inches, 4 inches. And I will start taking the 4 inches mark all the way down, and I would connect my line. Now next thing I will do is to come to the bust point area and take 1 inch upwards and also take 1 inch downwards. Now this is to avoid friction and tightness around the bust area. Now on your under bust, take 1 inch on both sides, and on your waist, take 1 inch on both sides. You can also do ½ inch. Now on the blouse length, take 2 inches upwards. Now connect your dot lines. Now we are going to return the dart allowance back to our pattern. Now remember we added 2 inches for the dart, so we'll put it back on the under bust area, and also on the waist area you will put back the 2 inches. Now this part is done. Now you will come up to your shoulder slant measurements and find the midpoint. Now connect it to the 1 inch you marked upwards from your bust point. Now from this line, you're going to go upwards by 2 inches or 2.5, depending on how busty you are. I would use 2.5 inches. Now, you're going to take ½ inch dart on both sides. This dart is important so as to give you a better grip on the upper part of your bust. Now connect your dart lines. Now whatever that you have added here, you will return it back on your bust line right here. Now we use that of 1 inch. We'll add that 1 inch back to our bust line. Now we'll go ahead and take our armhole curve, find the midpoint armhole depth, go in by ½ inch or 2 centimeters. Now take 2.5 inches upwards. Now connect your curve. From our bust point area, we would go upwards by 1 inch or 2 inches or 3 inches, depending on how low you want your sweetheart to be. Now I am using 1 inch and I would connect it like this, and the curve is ready. Now remember, you can use 2 inches, you can use 3 inches, depending on your preference on how low you want your sweetheart neck to be. Now I would connect the rest like this to join my armhole curve, and also curve that part a little. Now I will be taking the neckline width of 3.5 and 3 inches in length, and I will connect my curve. Now start connecting the rest of the lines. Now I will take 5 inches inwards from the hem and take 1 inch downwards from the length, and I would connect my curve. This is optional if you want a curve at the bottom. Now I will cut my pattern out. Remember, when cutting your darts, make sure you have no sharp edges. Try to curve your hand a little so as to have curved edges. Now our front pattern is ready. Now this is all you need to make a tube blouse or tube crop top. And note, when cutting on your fabric, you need to add 1/2 inch seam allowances on the dart sides. On each side of your darts, like this, 1/2 inch on each side when cutting on your fabric. And also add 1/2 inch at the top. Now, if you want to make a tube bustier dress with a net, then you will need this pattern. Now you will cut this on your net fabric or lace fabric, depending on what you want to make use of. And also add 1/2 inch seam allowance on this part so as to join your pieces together. I showed you how to make a sweetheart neckline, and now I am going to show you how to cut a straight yoke. Now I took a dart of 5 inches upwards and I came downwards from my length, and I took 2 inches and I connected my dart lines. And this is my bust line, my bust point, my under bust line, my waistline, and my blouse length. And now you will go upwards to your shoulder just like we did for the other one, and find the midpoint and come upwards from your bust point, come upwards by 1 inch. Now connect your line. Now go upwards from your bust line by 2.5 inches. Now you're going to place 1/2 inch darts on both sides. Now next thing you're going to do is connect your dart lines. Now I am just going to go in and place my armhole curve, just like we did for the previous one. Now remember, we placed 1 inch dart here. We're going to return it back on our bust line. I will place 1 inch dart right there, and I would connect my line to my waist. From your bust line, also go upwards by 2.5 inches. Now, in case you want a curvy neckline at the top part of your pattern, this is how you go about it. Come downwards from this line by 1 inch or 1.5, depending on how deep you want your neckline to be. And now just connect your curve like this. Connect it to the 2.5 on your armhole. And once you're done, you're going to cut like this. When you cut, you have your pattern. Now, if you want your neckline to be straight, just connect your line from this 2.5 inches. Connect it straight to the armhole line. So at this point, I am going to go on and cut this pattern out so you can have a clearer view of what this pattern looks like. This is going to be your yoke pattern. When you open it up, you will have a nice looking yoke. Now I will continue and cut up my dart lines. Now I'll just go on and add a little curve at the bottom, just like we did while drafting the other pattern. And this is going to be your bustier pattern if you want a straight look at the center front of your pattern. And this is going to be your yoke if you want to add net or lace to it to make a beautiful blouse for yourself. Now moving on, this is your back pattern. I will take a marginal line also at the top, and I will take my zipper seam allowance all the way down, and I will connect my lines. Now from my zipper line, I will take my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I will add ½ inch to that. Now I would also come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. Now I just took 3 inches, which is standard, to connect to the shoulder slope. And from the 1 inch I will take my armhole depth, which is 8.5. Now this will be my bust line. Now I will take my shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches, and I will take my shoulder to blouse length, which is 25, and also hemming allowance. Now I would extend my lines. Now I will take my bust circumference divided by 4. I will take my waist circumference divided by 4. And I will take my hip circumference divided by 4. Now next thing I will do is to add my seam allowances on the sides. I will take 1.5 seam allowance on the hip, on my waist 1.5, on my bust line 1.5, just like we did for the front pattern. Now we will start taking our nipple to nipple measurements, which is 8 inches divided by 2, and which gives you 4. And I am marking that right there and connect my line. Now onto my waist, I would add ½ inch for that on both sides. Now I will take 2 inches from my blouse length upwards, and I'll take 1 inch from my bust line downwards. Now I would connect my dart lines. Now we added 1 inch dart on our waist. We will take that 1 inch dart and place it back on our pattern. And next thing I will do now is to connect all the lines. Now from those points, your center back, go down by 1 inch. You can go down by 1.5. You can go down by ½ inch, depending on how low you want your center back to be. Now we would connect the line like this. At the bottom part of our blouse, you can go inwards by 5 inches and go down by 1 inch. Remember, I said this is optional. That is if you want your blouse to have a curvy shape at the back and not sharp. Now I am taking 3.5 inches for the width of my back neckline. Always make sure that the width of your back and front neckline are the same in all patterns. Now I took 3 inches for the length of my neckline. Now I changed my mind. I will be using 2 inches for the length of my neckline. You can use any length of your choice. Now I will just connect the line and also connect my neckline curve. Now find the midpoint of your armhole depth. Now connect your armhole curve. And now it's time to cut this pattern out. Remember to cut open your center back for your zipper. Also cut open your center back for your zipper. Now our pattern is officially ready, and this is all you need if you want to make a tube top. You only need these 4 pieces. Now remember to add seam allowances on the dart side, 1/2 inch seam allowance. When cutting on your fabric, add 1/2 inch. Add no seam allowance on the zip side. Add 1/2 inch seam allowance here and here, all the way down, and had no seam allowance on the sides because your side allowance is already there. Now also remember to add 1/2 inch on the tops because you'll be turning it with a lining or whatever you want to use to turn it over it. Now if you want to make a blouse with a yoke or lace or net topping, now you will need to add this pattern. Now all you need to do is add no seam allowance on the zip side. Just come down to the bottom and add 1/2 inch seam allowance to add it to this bottom part. That is all you need to do. And that is all for this tutorial. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and hope to see you in more videos. Bye.